how to be prepared before entering the backcountry, the equipment you need, safety courses you should take, and the very real dangers about getting into the backcountry. Tonight we have a great group of panelists, and we're going to really specifically focus on sharing the backcountry, different user groups, increasing access, as well as some safety points and a lot of different topics about land use, permitting, other topics like that. Our panelists are, we have Cecilia Reed right next to me. She is the Mountain Resorts Manager for the Forest Service. She works in the Eldorado National Forest and the Lake Tahoe Basin Management Unit. Next to her is Liz Moore, who is the Mountain Resorts Specialist for the Forest Service, and she works in the Tahoe National Forest and is based out of the Truckee Ranger District. Next to her, we have Geoff Quine, who is the President of Tahoe Backcountry Alliance. One more down, we have Todd Wold, the Board Secretary for Lake Tahoe Snowmobilers. And on the end is Jen Callahan, who is a ski guide with Alpenglow Expeditions and a backcountry ambassador for RMU. So I want to thank all of our panelists for coming out tonight. You represent a broad array of backcountry organizations and user groups. We are going to start out with just a basic question. So in general, we're going to get into kind of some nitty-gritty overview of access and different user groups in the backcountry, but we're going to start out with safety. So my first question for all of you, and we can maybe start here with Cecilia, who has the mic, is if you could each just describe what you do to prepare for an average day in the backcountry, or what you would suggest that people do to become fully prepared and know before they go into the backcountry.
Okay. Again, I'm Cecilia Reed, and thank you guys all for joining us. For me, before you go into the backcountry and whatever sport you're into, it's best to do some research. So depending on what you're doing, you should know where you're going. You should check Caltrans to see what the roads are like. You should check to see if the trailhead you're planning on going is plowed. You know, is it going to be open? Does it require a permit? and you know, so first you're going to like plan. You're going to look online, check our Sierra Avalanche Center, see what the conditions are. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Okay. See what the conditions are. You know, is it a safe day to go? Look at the slopes. Where are you going? What are you going to do? Whatever your sport is, you need a plan to be prepared for that sport. So depending on what sport you're into, you want to make sure that you have the safety gear that you need for that sport, and you know how to use it, and you've worked with other people. The people you're going with are also knowledgeable, and you've done some planning, preparedness, ready to go, right? The other things is just like checking on all the different conditions and what else would I say? I just make sure I bring lots of layers. You know, I'm prepared. I have my pack always has. I'm sure that these folks will talk about all the different things. If you're going to go in the backcountry, you want to have like a probe, beacon, shovel, and you know how to use it. It's on. It works. It's not really old and ancient. And then it's probably good to like do a little bit of online research. If you have the funds to learn from a guide or something, that's good. If you don't, you know, do some research online, like kind of know what you're getting into. But that's what I do. A lot of my stuff is front country. I mostly work with mountain resorts, so it's like a lot of it's inbounds, working with places that are controlled. Avalanches are controlled, and so anyways, that's all I got to say. There you go.
I think so. Along with all that stuff that Cecilia said, my planning kind of starts early in the season, so we go over job hazard analysis, you know, make sure our vehicles are good to go, check our radios, do all the communication checks, things like that. And then like on the day-to-day, yeah, like she said, do the research, know where you're going, know if you need a permit, and make sure you're parking in the most efficient and practical place. Don't park where there's no need to plow, or you know, where you're going to lock someone in. So it's mostly common sense, but it's easy to overlook something. So
yeah, that's a great start. In addition to what Elizabeth and Cecilia just outlined, SAC, checking the weather forecast, what's going to happen when I'm out, what's happened overnight, and then, how long am I going to be out for that day, and planning accordingly as far as like food, water, basing my layers upon what the weather's going to do. And you brought up a good point as far as parking goes. As far as once you get to the trailhead, like what's the most efficient way to park as far as maximizing the amount of users at that spot, but also being safe as far as how you're parking and how you're going to exit. I guess back to the pack, and as far as like imagining myself like leaving the house after I've checked SAC and the weather forecast. The assessment starts like when I get up in the morning, like what does the snow look out on my back deck, and I can make inferences about what it might look like, different elevations and locations around the basin. And then, I'm leaving the house, I get to the trailhead, and I park, and then, I'm gonna go over the day's plan with my group, like where are we going, how long do we think we're gonna take, what's the snowpack like, what are the hazards, transparency among the group, good communication. And then we launch, and again, the assessment goes on all day long, like what's the snowpack doing over time, different aspects, different elevations and whatnot. And I think that's like one of the really fun things about backcountry skiing is that assessment process and observing like what's going on out there in the field and acting accordingly. And then again, like you can't stress this enough, this communication within your group and making sure you're safe and also having tons of fun too. So yeah, Todd?
All right, thank you. Todd Wold with the Lake Tahoe Snowmobilers. Clearly there's some different things to think about if you're going out there moto. There's a lot of information that came out this week that's going to talk about what's in your pack and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to avoid that. Please read it and watch it. Really getting the plan before you're going to go, the first thing I'm going to look for is education. The Sierra Avalanche Center has free moto courses through the OHV grants, and so if I know people that have that education and have their Abbey 1, have their Abbey 2, I'm going to assemble a group that I can trust. Like you guys mentioned, depending on the weather and the report that SAC put out, we're going to determine where we're going to go based on that. Monday morning I went out and I played in everything that you guys don't want to play in. It was completely flat and 3 feet deep, and I loved it. But I didn't want to go anywhere near anything Abbey danger, and there was only 2 of us, so that's going to depend where we're at as well, as opposed to having 4 or 5 of us. I'm also going to make sure, I think something a lot of people don't think about, we have the ability to not worry as much about what we carry with us, because we can carry more, so we don't have to worry about weight. So I'm going to make sure my Garmin is charged, and I'm going to have my inReach ready to go. I'm going to make sure that I have all my contacts in my Garmin and my inReach so that I can hit SOS if I have to, and let people know, hey, we're coming out later than we thought, but we're good. We also get the opportunity to carry a radio. So we're going to talk with our group and say we're all on radio, we're all going to be on this channel, and have that plan put together and meet as a group. Like you mentioned, where are we going? Are we going under Abbey terrain, past Abbey terrain? We do have the luxury, but also the danger of covering a little bit more territory, and so we've got to be careful of where that goes. And of course, there's things like make sure your sled's ready to go and you have all your emergency equipment and whatnot. The only other thing I would mention is we have to really pay attention to our maps. We're not allowed in wilderness areas. There are OSV legal and then non-OSV legal areas, and so we have to pay really close attention where we're at. So I'll download something like Avenza Maps, make sure I have that QR code there so that I can know that I'm in the right area.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, so a typical day at the Alpenglow office is about an hour, sometimes more, before clients even show up. And I think that's the really interesting factor of like operational hazard management is that, I kind of made some noise there, is that we really put so much effort into being on the same page with our fellow instructors. I'm an area instructor, so we have a full-on projector in our office with the maps of the places we're allowed to guide, of the places that we will absolutely not take clients into for the day. And I think all of this stuff kind of like dovetails together really nice from an operational perspective because, yeah, we have great radio communications. We all agree to be on the same radio page, and then we document. Every morning we fill out what's called an AM form. And the AM form has the weather. It has the avalanche forecast for the day. And so we all kind of like agree first thing in the morning on so much stuff, and we get to use kind of our training as professionals to make sure we're all on the same page. So I think that's kind of the secret element to how we start our day, is that we spend about an hour talking things over, agreeing to things before we even go outside. So using radios to kind of like link that up and affirm it in the field kind of just like brings it back to the whole idea that you've got to be able to like communicate with your partners really, really well. So that plus everything else that these guys do.
Great, I think those were great answers from everyone. It was great to see different perspectives from typical non-moto motor users and then guides as well, and the behind-the-scenes work that goes on there. I think everyone would agree that safety and being prepared is the number one most important thing before you're getting out into the backcountry. Next up, I think it's no secret to everyone that we've had a big boom in users in the backcountry. Many more people are getting out and backcountry skiing, splitboarding, snowmobiling. That is part of the reason Backcountry Safety Awareness Week was founded 3 years ago. It was the winter after COVID. Outdoor recreation in general saw a big spike, and with the ski resorts being closed or limited access, we had a lot more people getting out into the backcountry who hadn't before. And so I just wonder, from all your varying perspectives, what sort of impacts are you seeing from this big increase in the amount of people out?
Yeah, I guess I'll start since I've got the hot mic over here. I think from our perspective, you know, the trailheads have been way more crowded, and crowded's maybe not the right word, because the way I like to look at it is like, at least there's more people who are getting out into these places to care about them and maybe get out of their own experience and change, you know, their perspective on the world. But yeah, it's absolutely been an influx. I mean, I started my career as an area instructor during COVID, so work was, I had work coming out of my ears. It was so busy, and it was really cool, like the number of people who wanted to do it right. So yeah, big influx of numbers for sure.
We're just gonna go back this way.
If you've got something to add, yeah, you might have some targeted questions.
All good. I feel like we're at the end of the ripple effect. So I feel like the ski resorts get overcrowded, and therefore people get into backcountry skiing. That gets overcrowded, so then they go into skinning. That gets overcrowded, so they get into sled skiing, and so forth. What we're seeing a little bit is people thinking snowmobiling is easy, and they want to get into it, and they don't have the education. They don't have the AVI 1, AVI 2. They don't have the gear. And they think that they're going to be able to just get out there and the sled's going to do all the work for them. It's a lot more difficult than that. It takes a lot of practice and training, and you know, I'm not going to compare it to some of the stuff you guys do, which is also extremely difficult work. But it's a lot more than what they expect. And we are also seeing snowmobiles give the opportunity for families to go out together. And so we see a big groups of, not big groups, but we see entire families with children and at all ages. We see people who are older, who know their knees can't hold up anymore, their backs can't hold, you know. I'm starting to feel that myself. I personally know 2 people who do not have a leg, one person who does not have an arm, who utilize snowmobiles to be able to access and enjoy some of the sports that they wouldn't be able to access in other ways. So all of that combined, we see a big use in that, growth in use. The other impact I think we see is just new people coming that don't know the maps, they don't realize that there are some trailheads that are human-powered only, there are others that are legal for snowmobiling, and when they don't realize that, that can create some conflicts, because they don't think we should be there. And we would like to advocate for more education, more signage, and that's one of the things we're working really hard toward, is so that we can make sure that people can know before they go, not just about the gear and the safety, but also where they're going and why, and then make their own decision based on that.
Yeah, I guess to add on to what Jen and Todd said, yeah, there've been a lot of changes as far as like backcountry access in the last couple of years. I started skiing backcountry in Tahoe like 1995. Back in the days when like there was no plowing at trailheads, like you had a red shovel or two or three in the back of your truck, and you pulled in and you shoveled your spot. Fast forward to when the pandemic started, and we saw this huge influx of users. I guess I would say like some of the biggest changes I've seen, which echoing what you said as far as like not just more users but more new users that like may not know what exactly they're doing. So that's a big thing. And also too, I suppose, and some of you may have experienced this as well. Going to your favorite trailhead at dark 30 and you get that like the butterflies in your stomach when you're like 5 minutes out, like, oh, is there going to be a spot or not? That's kind of new. So more users makes, if you get more users and access is like staying largely the same as far as quantity, it gets more competitive, right? So that's been a big impact as well, and that's something that Tahoe Backcountry Alliance is working to expand. So I would say that's kind of like the impacts I've seen, the most visible impacts.
I think from a Forest Service perspective, we have really seen an influx in parking at trailheads, and not just backcountry skiers, all kinds of users. People just want to come up and see snow, and people want to go sledding, and there's something out there for everyone. So, and we're trying to accommodate all of these different user groups, and our staffing and resources haven't necessarily increased at the same scale as the COVID crowds have. So we really rely on these partnerships to be able to identify new parking areas or ways we can kind of allow access and mitigate these issues that we've been seeing.
I don't know if I have a whole lot to add. Yeah, we just have a large increase of users. As the Forest Service, we're a multi-use agency, and so we're really trying to accommodate all user groups, not a particular user group. So even though a trailhead may be a snowmobile trailhead, you're going to find they're going to have people just out there snowplaying, or that's because that's the plowed parking lot. You're going to have that's where people are going to access that. And so from our perspective, we want to increase. Not necessarily increase the use, but we want to allow the use for all groups of folks and diversity, and just like allow to accommodate our multi-users. We try to educate, and we could probably do a better job of educating folks. But yeah, we're limited staff, and so we do rely on our partners to do a lot of the education around like how to utilize. I can't remember if we had a question later about like leave no trace, and yeah, okay, so I'll wait. Okay.
Well, thank you all. I think clearly there are a number of different problems or challenges that need to be addressed as we're getting all these new users in the backcountry. It's both education, making sure people know what they're doing out there, as well as just the literal access, having maybe larger parking lots, making sure roads are plowed, things like that, as well as sort of the stewardship, taking care of trailheads. We'll start out with the education. So what are some ways that we can get all of these new users up to speed? Maybe people have looked at the website, maybe they've taken a NARI course and they're out in the backcountry, but what are some other ways that we can reach these users, teach them beyond the very basic safety tips, how to behave, how to act in the backcountry? If you've got courses, you can add to that, or we can go to the community organizations.
Yeah, I'll let some of these folks talk about maybe some of their resources, but if you go into our Sierra Avalanche Center, there's a whole list of area courses and different guides that you can link to. Additionally, there's a lot of different classes. You could take backcountry wilderness classes, you could take first aid CPR would be like a really good classes to have, just to know how to save a life. There's lots of classes out there, but for just like knowledge is, if you just go on to the different websites, there's so many websites out there that you can link to. The Forest Service one is clunky, I'll just put it out there, but we do have like lists of like where, if you can make your way through all of our stuff. But honestly, we have some really good folks, like at least for like the Lake Tahoe Basin, If you call our front desk, they're pretty knowledgeable. The folks that work there have worked there for 30, 40 years. They could tell you where to go, and they can link you into the right person to talk to. So some of it's just like doing some of the research, talking, looking online, seeing what those resources are. There's so many things, and you can contact me. If you have questions about where you could go, what you could do, and some of the classes that are out there. But yeah, I would just start with calling our front desk. That we have really knowledgeable people there.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many resources online, and there's several free courses, and events like this are huge too for helping the community get involved in, just learning more and helping your friends find out about these resources and things like that, and just talking to people and being open to working, taking beginners out and kind of telling them what you know and showing them what maps you're using and what apps you're using and things like that.
Yeah, I guess to add on to what Cecilia and Liz said, so with Tahoe Backcountry Alliance, we have, I think we created last year, the Backcountry Tips and Etiquette, which has just kind of like bullet points of like, generally like how you should go about your business in the backcountry, whether it's like not letting your dog crap in the skin track, or not like dropping down on someone, if there's like a convex rollover, like terrain related stuff like that. So it kind of spans the full experience. So we have that program, which I think is helpful for new users. There are lots of, you can hire a guide as far as the education component, but there's also lots of like free community education opportunities as well. Off the top of my head, Palisade Ski Patrol offers Avalanche, Abbey One scholarships. Tahoe Nordic Search and Rescue has a youth backcountry program, which is actually taking applications until the 19th, if you know any teenagers. And they're going to do a one-day Abbey class with Logan Talbot and Devin Heemstra, who's a patroller over at Mount Rock Ski Patrol. So lots of paid options, but lots of free options too. And I think one of you mentioned this as well, just like finding someone who is knowledgeable in the backcountry and you're comfortable like going out for the day with. That goes a long way and is obviously free as well. And just taking it upon yourself to educate yourself. As you said, there's a wealth of online resources, or if you want to get old school and get like an actual book, you can get that too. So the wealth of it though does make it challenging to a certain degree, because you have to sift through all the resources that maybe aren't viable, and find stuff that is like like ARI approved more or less. So I guess that would be my spiel as far as like educating yourself, or new users, and how to educate yourself and be a good backcountry community member.
The Lake Tahoe Snowmobilers, we were created in 2019 for education and safety. As far as getting your Abbey 1, getting your Abbey 2, it's almost like a minimum standard now. Trying to change that culture within, like, hey, sorry, where we're going riding today, you don't have the right gear, you don't have the right training, I'd love to ride with you someday, but it's not going to be today, and trying to change that. We partner very closely with SAC, with the Sierra Avalanche Center, paying for a $500 or whatever it costs course, being able to get it for free because of the OSV funding is huge for those free moto courses, and so we really promote that. On the national level, the Avalanche Alliance is providing ARI training, and we've got, literally this week, we've got 2 of our members getting Pro 1 certified due to that. So a lot of the work is in that effort as well. We do, while there's snow, which this year is phenomenal, 3rd Saturday of the month, which happens to be this Saturday for the end of this week's event, we have our monthly meetups. We're going to be at Blue Lakes, and we rotate, each month, but we're going to be at Blue Lakes, Hope Valley, Snow Park, and we have a beacon park that we set up, and Sierra Avalanche Center will be there, and pull out your beacon, practice using it. Do a multiple burial, do a single burial, practice every single month. Doing this once in a while, you did a class 3 years ago, that's not enough. We also, same thing with like your airbags. If you're carrying your airbag, one of my biggest pet peeves is when I see an airbag for sale on Facebook Marketplace and it says never been deployed. What kind of fool are you? Right? So we want you to deploy it regularly. So we recently invested in an ARVA refill canister thing, and we appreciate all of your businesses who are letting us do refills there, because we want you to blow it at the end of the season, blow it multiple times throughout the season, make sure you know how it works, make sure you know how to use it, you know how much tension goes, all that kind of stuff. So those are the things that we're promoting.
So, yeah, and I think kind of from my perspective, there's just such a strong community in Lake Tahoe of people who just want to share resources with each other. I know the only reason I became a guide or an area instructor is because of scholarships available to me through the community. And some of those scholarships were through the Safe As Clinic, which used to be just women, but now it's co-ed. So there's scholarships available there. Sierra Avalanche Center.
Sorry.
Didn't think it was that funny, Robbie. Yeah, and I think even if you don't have this like incredible gnarly background, search and rescue is really where I feel like I got my fire lit to be part of this community. I came to search and rescue kind of as a greenhorn, and they actually provided me with a scholarship to help get my Pro 1, which if you look at the area website, there's lots of hoops and steps and things to do, but search and rescue takes volunteers at any level of your experience. So I'm not saying all of you should run out and join Tahoe Nordic Search and Rescue, but I do think that it's just another example of how many cool free community things. And then I think finally, the knowbeforeyougo.org website and the ARI YouTube. I swear, even as an instructor, I'll go to the ARI YouTube and watch how their professionals teach avalanche courses, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is like, I need to do exactly what they're doing to teach my courses. So if you just use YouTube and lean on your beautiful community all around you, you'll find like heaps of free resources.
Great, thank you all. I think that really shows how much more there is to do beyond just taking that intro area course or going out with someone who knows what they're doing, and how it can really be a lifelong journey of learning how to be safe in the backcountry. I would encourage everyone to check out all of their organizations, and a little plug for takecaretahoe.org/backcountry. We've got a lot of resources on there this week that you can check out. Next up, I think we'll really focus in on the access, so I might direct this one specifically to Geoff and Todd, but if anyone else has other comments, feel free to chime in. So what would you say is the overall state of backcountry access in Tahoe right now, and what are your organizations doing to increase access to more trailheads or allowing more users to get to some specifically popular trailheads?
Okay. You want to go first?
No, go for it.
All right. I think a couple points that are worth just pointing out, making sure people are aware of. Non-moto users have 100% of the forest. You guys can go anywhere you want. And we don't. It's a little more limited. And the reason I point that out is because there are trailheads that are human-powered only trailheads, and then there are moto legal trailheads which have been built by our registration fees. There are also snow parks which have also been built by our registration fees. The snow park pass pays for the bathrooms and the snow removal, but the snow park exists because of our registration fees. So I just point those things out for, hey, I use an example of, I like to kayak. There's times when I kayak, I might go out on Boca or Prosser or Donner Lake, and I didn't mean to say Prosser, but Donner Lake, and I know I'm going to run into jet skis and some other things of the sort. And then there's times that I don't want to run into moto, and so I'm going to go somewhere else. I say that just to say, please look at where you're going, who paid for the parking that you have. If it's the area that we paid for, we don't mind sharing it at all. But share it with us, and be patient with us. There's lots of grants out there. We have the luxury, being in Tahoe, of having Nevada and California. And so depending on where you're at, and we work with the Eldorado, the LTVMU, the Tahoe National Forest, and the Humboldt Tiobe over in Mount Rose. And so those are important things just to think about, be aware of as we have access. And
What do you think about
Sorry.
Tahoe? Tahoe Backcountry Alliance had its genesis back in 2015, some of you may recall, like on the West Shore with Jake's and Hidden Peak. They did some shoulder work there, and it basically took away a lot of the parking for backcountry access in the wintertime. And that's, you know, we got a quick victory. We're like, oh, this will be super easy. More access, no problem. Since then, you know, we've continued to work on increasing access. You know, we were instrumental in working with Visit Truckee Tahoe to make the West End parking lot for the lake run down from Sugar Bowl plowed. That was not previously plowed before, so that was we felt good about making that a little bit more user friendly. And the lake run, one of our board members, Glenn Polson, the snow leopard, his dad was skiing a lake run 100 years ago. So there's, you know, historic use there. So it was really important to Tahoe Backcountry Alliance that we were able to keep access for users and make that lake run viable. And also, you know, it's really important to keep the neighborhood happy as well. You know, there were bad faith users who were using the lake run and going through private property, like chucking beer cans in the yards and whatnot. And so we had some signs to help people navigate out to the West End parking lot. Since then, we've continued to work on increasing access areas around the lake. We are looking at you know, some areas on the West Shore, also the South Shore. We've been talking with the Forest Service on hopefully some new parking lots down there as well, increase access in areas where it was kind of unclear and dodgy before, so we're cautiously optimistic there. And then building on access, like, you know, I got to give credit to Anthony, our executive director here. Like, he came on board like a year ago. You know, he really like brought the idea of access, expanded our idea of access to the backcountry, and we are going to be launching a program on the 28th for Washoe youth, Kids on Snow. Tahoe Backcountry Alliance has bought a raft of cross-country ski gear. We're going to get the Washoe kids out on snow at Tahoe Cross Country on the 28th. We have 3 more days after that to get them on snow. The idea being is that they have the gear, they get the training, skills training, but then also like a natural history component, snow safety, you know, and then they go through, you know, those 4 days, and then they can go skiing whenever and wherever they would like. So I think that's been a really huge add-on for us, is expanding, you know, our vision of access. You know, access isn't just, you know, trailheads for the usual suspects. So we're really excited about that program as well.
Yeah, I don't know if I have too much to add. Just, you know, the Forest Service, we definitely encourage access in all of our trailheads, and there's only so much space that we can do, you know, that we can manage. So we really rely on partnerships to be able to identify these areas, and even on forest and off forest, to kind of help the community and spread the user groups all over the area.
I don't know that I have a whole lot to add either. We do have a number of programs. We are trying to encourage access into our onto national forests. Some of the ski resorts have ski with the ranger programs, and some of these backcountry like classes and stuff. So, you know, I don't know. A lot of the organizations do require special use permits in order to have these outfitter guides and educate folks.
Great, thank you all. We definitely all really appreciate the work you're doing to expand access, parking lots, plowing is kind of the behind the scenes, less flashy stuff. Geoff, you were saying that earlier, but is obviously super crucial to getting people out there, and it's great to have people putting their time and their money into that, even when there's sometimes not very much recognition that you or the organization behind expanding a parking lot or getting a road plowed that wasn't plowed before. Next up, and you kind of touched on this, Geoff, but another important part about the backcountry is knowing where you are while you're out there. Backcountry areas can be really big, and that land can be owned by different owners. Some of it you can be allowed to be in, some of it you maybe are not allowed to be in. That can be kind of hard to wrap your head around if you're just out in the middle of a snowy forest, and clearly there's been nobody out there, and maybe no one will know if you go in there or not. I think we might start this one over with Jen at the other end, but if you just want to weigh in on the importance of knowing where you are, staying on public lands, and also want to chime in about how ski resorts factor into that as well, and entering or exiting resorts.
Yeah, and I just have to say too, I'm sorry, I have to leave right after this, so, double booked myself tonight. But, yeah, I think it's been really interesting in my career. I worked as a snowcat guide for Homewood, which, our cat came, right up to the boundary of the forest where we would interact with snowmobilers, we'd interact with backcountry users, we'd interact with people sledding. I'm not even kidding, I've seen some sledding in some incredible places. And all that kind of tells me is that there's just this like really interesting, I call it a petri dish, that Lake Tahoe is, where we really do come up against these like pretty fascinating boundaries. And the way we operationally navigate that is we use applications such as Caltopo and Gaia. Recently I started using Onyx because we get a pretty good discount on that. But all of these mapping applications, are kind of in this supercomputer in your pocket. And I could go on and on and on about how radical it is that we have geolocating software in our pocket. So really, what I'll leave it at is that it's just kind of up to you to get familiar with the technology we have at our fingertips, because there's so much you can do. Caltopo has the avalanche forecast on it now. It has slope angle relief, it has wind direction, so you have all these like crazy free things just at your fingertips. But say this thing dies and you don't have your phone, of course, knowing how to read a topographic map and understand, I'm so excited we have the people we have here tonight, because certain boundaries do totally mean a certain thing. It's like, why can't we do certain things in the wilderness area? Or why is the backcountry considered, when you leave a ski area gate, it's not the side country, in my opinion. It's, you go into the backcountry, right? So knowing what those things are, like calling the Forest Service or emailing one of your cool local operations, has kind of been, even as like a professional operational standpoint, like how we operate. So there's a lot of resources. I'll leave it at that.
I mentioned earlier that it's just a part of the snowmobiling culture. We have to know where we're at. Know not to go into the wilderness, know where those boundaries are, but we also have to know where the non-legal riding areas are as well, and stay out of those sensitive habitats. Part of that, and I'll kind of tie into the last question as well with access, is, you mentioned topo maps and all of that. We have the luxury, for instance, on Monday, I went out playing where it was nice and flat. Places you guys don't really want to go, because it was completely flat. And I had a blast. But I went there because it was Navi Day, and I knew I needed to stay away from certain, slopes and whatnot. That creates the challenge with the access piece. So it's the map piece, but it's also the access piece, because now I need a place to park. I need to be able to clear the Forest Service parking that is off of Prosser Dam Road, or up at Thielen, off of the 06. And things of that sort. So we need to have open communication with our forests and our land managers so that we can open up that parking, spread out that access, and also allow us to access areas that will then create better parking for you guys as well, because now we're going to go to a different spot.
I don't really have a whole lot to add here. I think what Jen and Todd said was pretty spot on. With the technology we have nowadays, there really isn't an excuse to end up on private property unless you just get spun around and make that mistake. But also I think it's really important to echo Jen's point. Like, this is something I think we probably both learned it with Tahoe Nordic Search and Rescue. Is like, you can't just trust your life to anything that runs on batteries. So I think it is really important to be able to navigate old school with a map and compass, because it gets super cold and your battery goes to zero, and your visibility is low. Like, you're gonna have to figure out how to navigate back to your vehicle successfully. So having those routine skills and not depending on what's on your phone is super important.
I was just gonna add that the Forest Service uses Avenza a lot. You can download a lot of Forest Service maps on there to find out where the motor vehicle access is and things like that. And then I was also gonna say, there's a lot of different seasonal closures. So, just because something was open last year doesn't mean it's open the next year. So it's just important to keep up to date on all of that stuff.
Yeah, and I'll chime in with, or second what Liz was saying about some of the closures. So, after you have a fire, like on the Eldorado, we had the Caldor fire, so we had a forced closure for about a year. So you just need to know what closures there are, and a lot of that stuff you can just call the front desk and they'll be able to tell you some of that stuff. In this area, we have a lot of what we call checkerboard, so with the old railroad. So like every other section, which is a large area, is private. And so where you think might all be national forests and it's public lands and I have access, it's not. It's owned by what was a railroad company, maybe over time. So some of that stuff if you look at a map, you should know what's gray, what's green, all that other stuff, where you're allowed to be. And then where you're starting from, if it's private or if it's not private. And then the other thing is there has been like an increase in limiting access. And so a lot of that stuff is just folks like yourselves being advocates, and working towards keeping access to your favorite places, because there has been folks that are starting to limit some of that access, and working with our partners. And so working for a public land management agency, we don't usually have funds to plow parking lots and do a lot of that stuff. We're all based on your taxes, and so however much folks want to spend on that stuff. So a lot of it's all like paid for out of parking permits and different things. And so anyways, yeah, continue to work with your partners.
Great, thank you
I'll
all.
hold on to other things.
Jen has got to get out of here. She's
Yeah.
headed to an event put on by Tahoe Backcountry Women. She's so invested. She's doubling down tonight,
Sorry,
but
thank you.
we can all give her a round of applause
Thank you,
for
guys.
taking time.
Thank
Say hi to Alpenglow for me.
All right, and now let's talk about trailheads and parking lots and etiquette. So we can kick it off with the Forest Service, sort of talking about keeping trailheads clean, leave no trace policies, and then we'll move into parking, navigating different types of vehicles as we get towards Geoff and Todd.
Right, there's a lot out there for leave no trace, and so all you have to do is Google leave no trace, and there's a whole entity around leave no trace. But a lot of it just goes with maybe what your parents taught you, or what you should have as etiquette. What you pack in, you pack out, right? And so if you're bringing a 12-pack of beer, make sure all those empty cans you bring out with you. Know the rules before you go. If you can have campfires, whatever they are. But a lot of it's just like clean up after yourself. There isn't anybody that is there to clean up after you. Whether you're at a trailhead or wherever you happen to be, there's not a public servant that's just there to clean up after you. So if you pack it in, you pack it out. Etiquette is just like, don't treat people the way you don't want to be treated, right? Don't leave your dog off a leash. Make sure that you have that you're being respectful of others. And so a lot of it's just like making sure that you're respectful of others. You're not blocking somebody in when you're parking. You're paying attention to your surroundings. You're not just blindly going in and just not thinking about things. So a lot of it's just like being responsible, being a responsible citizen. Maybe my thing.
So I think that, I'm a backcountry skier, so a lot of the human-powered recreation out there is fairly low impact because it's over snow, but there's so much use of those trailheads, so there's just a lot of concentrated impact in some areas. Dog poop is a huge thing, and I have a dog, I love skiing with them, but, in the spring, there's so much within the first, quarter mile or so from a trailhead, so just remember to bring poop bags and clean up after yourself. and as far as parking, make sure you're maximizing parking, don't block anyone in. And then another thing is camping at trailheads. Housing is a huge issue around here, and we all recognize that, but plow drivers need to be able to remove the snow from the trailhead. So just think about that when you're looking for a place to stay.
Yeah, I think these ladies hit on it pretty well. As far as like parking lots and trailheads, the parking can be like fairly fluid, especially like around when we get a bunch of new snow. But as you mentioned, just following whatever standard practice is for that parking lot. Like sometimes you need to park horizontally. Sometimes you can angle in, back in. Sometimes you need to back in at a 90-degree angle. So just kind of like see what the norm is and follow that. And if it's a new trailhead for you, maybe reach out. We were talking about like mentoring, and if you're new, ask people, call the Forest Service, whatever, and figure out like what that protocol is for that trailhead. And make sure, not only I think it's important to maximize parking, but also make sure that you're doing it in a safe way. I know there are some trailheads, in the Basin, Truckee, whatnot, where it would make the most sense to back in, but the road is like a 55-mile-an-hour road, with a turn on it, and you're doing a 3-point turn there, may not be super safe. So it's balancing and maximizing with also being like a safe, driver as well. So yeah, I think that's what I would add to what you had both mentioned.
And again, we have a different perspective on some of the stuff, which isn't bad at all. But we follow, like Nevada OHV takes on the Tread Lightly program, which is very similar to Leave No Trace. Or also I'll point you out to something called Quine. Very similar types of principles that have already been mentioned. And as I mentioned before, there are some of the parking areas, definitely not all of them, but snow parks, and then places like Little Truckee Summit and some of the others that are built by motorized funds from our registrations, that we just ask that you realize that unfortunately we can't park the same ways in some of those other ways. And so we just ask for your patience on that, understanding that it is an area that we're willing to share with you that we built, but we're not going to be able to be as tightly packed and so forth because we have to be able to unload and whatnot. But that being said, we also have to be aware of the impact we have on other user groups and on neighborhoods. So, for instance, if I'm within the first half mile, there might be little children on those little plastic discs that end up being left in the Forest Service broken up all over the place. Within a mile or two, it might be dog sleds. It might be somebody who's skinning one of the tracks we made for you. You're welcome. But go slow. I come around a corner and I see somebody in there. It's kind of like if you're on a mountain bike and you're coming down a trail and there's somebody on a horse. Be aware of that. Be aware of the different situation there. Slow down. Be kind. I will tell you this: we have a helmet on with goggles on. I promise you, we're smiling and waving under that. We really are. Let's say you're off of the 06 on Thielen behind the houses there. Wait a little bit. Just kind of putt your way out. Get a little away from the houses. Get a little away from the dog walkers. And then go enjoy. And just make sure you're aware of that. And of course, the principles of pick up after yourself. And you mentioned somebody with a 12-pack. Don't do that. You're on a motor. You don't need to be doing that.
Just saying what I see. What I pick up after.
A growler would be a good solution there.
Not on a motor, after. In the parking lot at the end of the day.
Thank you all. I'll just let everyone know this is going to be our last question, and then we'll open it up for a Q&A. So think about those burning questions you've got, and then we can ask them after this one. I think the planning process for Backcountry Safety Awareness Week has been really great, both to educate the public, but also bringing all these organizations together who work in similar fields and maybe don't always talk or communicate. If you're working in snowmobiles and someone else is working in skis or just the Forest Service, you're not going to work often, and there have been some very productive conversations about how you overlap, how you can work together. So if any of you just want to chime in on how you see your organizations being able to work together in the future to increase backcountry access and improve the experience for everyone, and also maybe how people can get involved and volunteer to help improve the backcountry experience for the public.
Yeah, I'm happy to start off. So, like Todd and I, like we had, obviously met on Zoom, but it was great to meet him here tonight. And it turns out we're both educators and have a lot in common. So that was really cool to have like another layer of something in common. And I mentioned this earlier in the week. Despite how motorized and non-motorized communities might access the backcountry differently, I think it's important to recognize that we both user groups like really value our public lands and accessing them in the wintertime, and that's I think like the overarching thing. I think that's the most important. Yeah, there's going to be differences here and there, but we're both pulling on the same rope in that respect, and I think that's important to keep in mind. As far as volunteering goes, we Tahoe Backcountry Alliance, we actually just launched a membership program. If you'd like to check that out at our website, and you can become a member of Tahoe Backcountry Alliance, and we have all kinds of events and opportunities to help the backcountry community here in the Tahoe Basin and in North Tahoe. And we'd love to have you on board. So please check out what we're all about, and we'd really value your support if that's something that you would be inclined to do. So I think that's probably what I would say there as far as like volunteering and working with different user groups.
Yeah, so I'm pretty new to the area, but I am just so impressed with the amount of organizations around here and how they all work together to, put on events like this and everything like that. We really rely on our partners and we use their volunteers for a lot of things, so definitely get involved in whatever way you can. I was also going to say, as a ski resort permit manager, we rely on them a lot too to help educate, help provide access, and kind of like be our eyes in some areas. So, yeah.
I guess other ways you can get involved outside of, these are your public lands. We're fortunate to live in a country that we have public lands, where you can access our areas. Every forest office has volunteers, so if you're interested in working for the National Forest, either as a volunteer or in a capacity as an employee, this is the time of year where we start hiring for our summer help. We have youth programs, and so you could always get involved with Forest Service or with other land management agencies or other agencies as you see fit. But yeah, we definitely rely on our partners. There's lots of programs out there. Give us Todd. We'll talk about.
For the Lake Tahoe Snowmobilers, we're 100% run by volunteers, nonprofit organization, all about safety, education, and whatnot. So LakeTahoeSnowmobilers.com, find us on Facebook, find us on Instagram. We'd love to have your participation. The other things that I would just add is we would love it if all user groups had to look at maps in the way that we do. It would really help reduce a lot of the misinformed conflicts that tend to happen in some key spots. And those are the kinds of things like, hey, you're not supposed to be here. Well, actually, the boundary's over there, north of Gopher Creek. We'll stay out of Tahoe Meadows. You enjoy over there. We'll be fine on this side of the ridge, in the Humboldt-Tahoe of Chickadee Ridge. Like, we know our boundaries. So we would love it if people would do that, even if you're not a fan of ours or still learning. We would love it if others would inform themselves about those things. I used the example earlier of being a kayaker. Sometimes I go where I don't want to run into motors. Sometimes I don't care. Same kind of thing. That's another thing we would ask. Make an educated decision on where you're going to go for. I had a housemate a couple years ago who was going up Castle Peak. She was human powered. She was going to skin up, split board down. She came back. She's like, I didn't know that was a snowmobile zone. And I was like, did you look before you go? And so we had a real cool conversation about that. And she was like, if I had known, I would have gone somewhere else. And I was like, fair enough. Like, nothing wrong with that. We would love to have conversations with our forests about less checkerboardy maps, so we know really where the boundaries are. And we would love it if they weren't OSV maps; they were winter user maps, so that we all know,
winter user
right?
maps.
Yeah, see,
I
I
brought
love
some.
it. I love it. What she said was, "I brought them. They're over here on the left-hand side."
But the winter and the snow.
Right? So, so we're working on that, and we're building those partnerships. The only other thing I'll add is we want to work with every group. We want to include every group. Clearly, that's because, you mentioned there's groups trying to close people out of access. Well, we're the ones getting hit the hardest on that. And so we want to be able to play nice with every group. Please know who you're working with and who your backing is and what other groups they're doing, especially if they're on a national level, because if they're fighting against us, then you ask the question about volunteering. Well, one of the ways you can volunteer is you can become vocal and work against that, so we don't lose more of our land than we already lost. My position is, hey, let's have some moto-only spots. We don't have any of those, but that would be a big problem because then you guys would lose access. So I say that a little bit sarcastically, tongue-in-cheek, but not completely either. Like, we can work it out. We can play together. And for our people, know when you're going to be around the little kids, know when you're going to be around other human-powered users, know when you're behind houses, play nice, be good, pick up after yourself, and get involved.
Great, thank you all. It's a lot of fun to see you all come together and collaborate. Now we will turn it over to the crowd. Does anyone have any questions?
Some additional comments. Todd Alton, I'm a good name, Todd. I'm a district wildlife biologist here in Truckee, and talking about access, the Tahoe National Forest is consistently looking for ways to bring back the green and the checkerboard. So we're actively working with partners and approaches to create more public land for all of you. And that's something that kind of gets missed in the back closets of what we do in real estate. But it's something we do on a consistent basis, on a yearly basis, and we consistently bring back acreages to public land on a regular basis. So something to look into. Secondly, as a wildlife biologist, I oftentimes have to look at the impact. I just ask that when folks are in the backcountry, it's usually a good time of year in the winter that most things are in dormancy, right? They're under sub-nival habitat, they're under snow, things are a little bit less impactful. But as you get into those shoulder seasons, you gotta look at the opportunities. Hey, I might be impacting something that's going into a breeding season early. Eagles start in January. Eagles start in January, February. Or you have a listed frog. And we have wet areas that are really critical. So the Fish and Wildlife Service, working with us, has said we need to monitor those sites. So we may put signage up at times. We may have crews out looking at use. We're not out there to ticket, we're out there to educate. So more importantly, it's just about keeping that access for you guys in all capacities and looking for those opportunities to lessen the impact overall. So, and then thirdly, special uses. Sometimes when we have things, imagine this, when a special use permit comes in, a lot of specialists look at it because I'm asked, what impacts are we gonna have? And so sometimes it may be very minimal for wildlife. It's in the winter, but if it's in the summer, there may be more, and I may have some things to say. That doesn't mean we can't do it. There may be some mitigations thrown in. There may be some approaches to finding the balance, because we want people in the public lands. So, thanks.
Can I respond to that now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I respond, Todd?
Yeah.
Thank you. On that note, there is research out there that shows, from a moto perspective, that moto has less impact on wildlife than actually humans. They actually get thrown off of their breeding season because they get startled by human users as opposed to motos. They know we're coming. Things like impact on things like the yellow-legged frog. Would love to have those conversations on things like, well, how far away from the water do they roam in order to breed? If it's 30 feet, then let's have that conversation, and then we would love to talk with our user group about stay 30 feet away from, or stay 50 feet away from the water sources instead of closing entire areas. And I'm not saying you were saying that or advocating for that. But I just wanted to follow up with that we love those conversations. We agree, stay out of Peraza meadows when there's no snow. Let's not use false science, such as, don't go if there's less than 12 inches. There's no scientific research to show the amount of snow that makes that impact. So let's use our scientific research and let's use the real data. And we want to have those open conversations so that we can also be a part of the solution. We definitely want to be that.
Great, thank you, Todd and Todd.
Todd,
Any other questions? Yeah.
You all talked a lot about mapping, and I'd love to hear your favorite apps and books for trails and maps.
For Moto, we have the luxury of having GPS units built into our newer sleds, and so there are like Polaris apps and things of that sort. I do have a Garmin InReach Explorer myself that I like to use. We also will download the QR code from the Forest Service with the Avenza maps. And being from Tahoe, you have to be a fan of Caltopo because it was developed by a local here. That does get a little bit challenging because we have all of those. You mentioned earlier, you don't want to be dependent on batteries. I have the USB port. I can keep my battery 100% charged at all times as long as I don't run out of fuel. But, those are the types of things that we think about and make sure that we have, and redundancy as well. And knowing that those things interfere with your beacon when you're in search mode and being able to be paying attention to that as well.
No, that's a good point about interfering with your beacon if you go into search. And also, has a bigger effect on, I forget whether it's send or receive a cell phone.
Searching.
Is it searching? Okay, thank you. But back to your question, I've used them all. I started off using Avenza to make my own custom maps, but to your point, Caltopo, you can't go wrong there. Matt Jacobs here in town, he created Caltopo. I'm super familiar with that, and I use that. That's what we use with Tahoe Nordic. OnX is a great partner of Tahoe Backcountry Alliance as well. That's a great application as well. So, all three are fantastic, and all three have pros and cons. I would say, do a little bit of research, find one you're comfortable with, and just get proficient with it, and just so it's like second nature with you.
I usually use Avenza, Caltopo, and I always carry a paper map. And I generally research on several maps before I go out.
And I'd probably duplicate those folks. You can come to like the Truckee Ranger District office or the South Lake Tahoe office. We do carry quad maps. You can buy them individually. They're actually not very expensive in comparison to what you might pay at REI. So I would say it's worthwhile to, if you wanted a paper map, you can pick up a paper map in our office. I'll hold on to it.
Anybody else?
What first aid training would you recommend having for the backcountry?
What was the beginning of the question? First aid training.
First aid training.
I would recommend, at the very least, a wilderness first aid and CPR. At the very least. And then regularly practicing it and refreshing it. And if you want to go deeper, you could do like a wilderness first responder, wilderness EMT, which is great too.
I'm former search and rescue out of Montana, and I was first aid, first responder, so I agree.
I think that those are great for all seasons, and I think avalanche awareness is a great kind of intro class for winter recreation.
Well, I got much to add to that.
Final questions? Yeah.
I have two. Todd, thank you so much for your perspective on snowmobiles and backcountry with the horses and mountain bikes. I just really appreciate you coming out and sharing, your heart of, we're waving and we want to get along. Thank you so much for being here. Geoff, a question for you. Would it be helpful, on the trailheads to be able to say we would recommend, for those of you new to this parking at this trailhead, you maybe park like this? Could that be, what are your thoughts on maybe adding that to the website or?
That's actually, one of our goals, we actually had a parking page a couple of years ago that identified trailheads. We're currently wrestling, but we want to get that page back up. And I guess the discussion we're having right now is how deep do we want to go as far as specifying how you park? Because as I mentioned earlier, it's often fluid. We definitely want to ID those places where there are usually trailheads. But I guess to answer your question and not dodge it, we're still discussing like how specific we want to get as far as parking. It would probably be like website based too, like just like putting, you know, a sign in Forest Service land would be way easier to just like have it on a website. You know, it would be great to collaborate if the Forest Service was interested in doing that though. It would be, to your point, excellent, because some people may not do their homework before they get to the trailhead. So to have a QR code, they're like, oh, hey, I'm here at this parking lot, QR code, like, oh, okay, like this is how I should park. That would be super helpful.
I think the issues that we run into there is, you know, when we have a big storm event like we just had recently, certain lots don't get plowed as fully as they do when we just get 6 or 8 inches of snow. So it's hard to be steadfast and just be like, oh, this is how this lot is, because it really does change depending on, you know, storm cycles. And we had that, you know, huge event last year during Christmas to New Year's, where that changed everything too for that stretch. And then everything turned off for a while. And then things started to open up, and then, you know, you could potentially park perpendicular in a zone that you couldn't a month earlier. But that said, I do think that there's opportunities for us to do some better messaging and more messaging on that front.
Definitely. Just a quick example, those of you who may be familiar with Deep Creek on Highway 89. You know, for several days after that storm cycle, there just wasn't really any of the usual public parking, i.e. near Goose Meadows and then at the actual trailhead itself, which causes problems, right? Because those of you, if anyone ski Deep Creek? So you've got that private driveway across the street from the trailhead, right? And they've been super tolerant as far as like people parking there historically, but it's a bad idea because people just like stack it in. And I've seen instances where like it would be difficult for people to get out of their driveway. So it is difficult, you know, because that part, the legit parking wasn't available there for a couple days after. So to Anthony's point, it really is hard to prescribe how you should exactly park because it is often a fluid situation.
Anthony, good point. One thing I want to offer to you guys and offer to the Forest Service as well, if it's a parking area that it's snowmobile legal and you run into those situations where it's not plowed properly and we can open up some parking, we would love to be able to help out with that. I can't make promises for every time, every situation, every location, but if you gave us a call and said, hey, let's open up Thielen, let's open up the parking lot at, you know, the snow came all the way down to Prosser, let's open up Prosser Dam Road so we can get some parking, and we're like, hey, we can park there too, I can get a plow there. You know, we might invest a little bit of money into that and help plow it for you, even though it's Forest Service property. You know, give us a little bit of a nod, like we're going to look the other way if you guys do it. We would be happy to do that, and you know, and that's helping all of us, right? One thing I'll say, it's a little tongue in cheek, but I'll say this as well. When you see our trucks with our big sled decks on it and our snowmobiles on top of that, and you're like, ah, those big trucks are in the way. Just remember, we're not pulling a trailer, so that's more parking for you.
There's more parking for everyone, Todd.
I kind of like dabble in all aspects of backcountry use. I'm a snowmobiler, I'm a skier, I'm a split boarder, I'm a photographer, filmmaker, everything. I dabble in everything. Something that sort of has come to mind to me just in the last hour, the beacon checks are really awesome that I've been seeing around. Something that I think maybe would be rad could be like a QR code that shows the maps that are on the beacon checks that are being dug out at all of these locations, so that it could be an ongoing education thing that isn't necessarily a word of mouth. They don't have to go online. If they walk past this sign that is at a popular trailhead or what have you, maybe they can see it and they can see where the machines can go and where they can go on foot or what have you. And that seems like something that could be kind of a nice addition to moving forward.
Recently, from the Nevada OHV fund, we were granted, with partnership of Humboldt-Tahoe, a kiosk that we're going to be installing at the boundary between the legal and the non-legal riding area there on the south side of 431, which is the boundary between the LTBMU and the HT. In that, there's going to be the events map, there's going to be the map. That's exactly what we're trying to do.
Cool.
So there's funding out there. It's motorized funding in California and in Nevada, and there's grants that we can apply for. In order to get those grants, we need a letter of support from the land manager that we can do that. We would also love letters of support from other agencies and organizations that are like, hey, we're in for this too as well. If we can get that grant, and if we can get the support of the forest that is where that spot is, if it's a motorized access zone, we'd be happy to help put that in.
And we'd encourage you all to, to be advocates and to talk with your district rangers, to work with your forest supervisors, to work with us, to provide some of that. We do try to have good signage out there and provide QR codes. Where we lack is we usually don't have a lot of staffing to maintain that, so sometimes the QR codes get old. And so that's where we rely on some of our partners to have some of that stuff, and to build some of the nice billboards you have out there. Yeah, it's just being involved.
Yeah, I agree. That would be really nice. I think a valuable resource for the public. As a small nonprofit, we got our hands full right now. They're kind of focusing on the trailhead piece. But to your point, I think that would be a valuable tool for all users down the road, and definitely something worth pursuing.
Final questions?
This might be a novice question, but what emergency services are out there for if something really bad does happen? What are your options? I mean, I've had friends who've broken a femur, miles out, and they were able to get services. I don't know the specifics of it, but it took a very long time, and it was a very tough situation to be put in. So.
Yeah, I know, that's a great question. I'm sorry it took so long for you guys to get help. Generally, there's a variety. Like cell phone, if you have cell coverage, that'd be nice, right? But like the Greg Brown song, a lot of the reason why I head deep into the backcountry is so that thing doesn't work, right? Where an inReach mini would be great. It uses satellite capability. Sat phones are another great tool. If you do have cell coverage, 911, that's where everything starts. As someone who volunteers with a volunteer search and rescue team, we can't do anything until we get dispatched from the sheriff's office. So it starts with 911, whether it's via your cell phone or your inReach mini or your sat phone or whatnot. And then just to clue you in on as far as what happens. If it's a cell phone, well, it's all cell phones now pretty much, right? Back in the day, landline, it would go to Burton Creek or Truckee PD or whatever, but now it goes, cell phones go down to Auburn Dispatch, CHP. And then it will get, fed to either Placer County, Eldorado, Nevada County, whatever. And it goes to, whoever the deputy, who's working that night. And then they'll, page out the local search and rescue team, which then goes to the search coordinator. They get all the info that they can from the deputy. They decide what kind of resources are needed for that SAR mission. Whether it's snowcat, snowmobile, human powered, all three, whatever. Might be multiple agencies. Sometimes, we can call in, local, like CalStar, South Shore, or Care Flight up here on North Shore. Sometimes the Longhorns from Fallon Naval Air Station Base will come up. So it depends, but it all starts with 911 as far as local EMS being dispatched to help you out.
I was kind of wondering, being put in that situation of if there was some way to opt into allowing yourself to be tracked, so that the emergency services knew where you were.
Yes.
That would just give them an edge to, hey, we know exactly where they are. Actually, we can get to them much quicker. We know what services to provide them. That sort of.
And there is that capability actually. We have the search and rescue team that I volunteer with have the ability to, let's say we did have cell contact with you, hopefully. We can text you a CalTopo map with an SMS locator. So once you click that link, we know exactly where you are.
That's huge.
He mentioned the inReach Mini. I carry the inReach Explorer, just a different version of the Garmin inReach. When I turn it on, I've got 3 plans I can choose from when I first purchase it. I buy the middle one, which is $24 a month. It tracks me every 10 minutes. Exactly where I'm at. If I message my partner or whatever and say, hey, I'm coming out late, it sends the GPS coordinates where I'm at. If I hit the SOS button, it tells them exactly where I'm at, right? So I'm gonna sit still. Otherwise, you know, they're gonna have trouble trying to figure out where I'm at. I had a buddy who was snowmobiling up out the Castle area who got helicoptered out last year. By being able to have that SOS button, and anybody I'm riding, I talked earlier about knowing my riding group. I tell my riding group, here's where my Garmin inReach is. If you need to hit it, I don't put it in my sled because my sled might go over a cliff. Right? It's on my person. It's on my backpack, tethered to me. That being said, I think it's also connected 911 first, of course, but it's connected to the question about first aid and what level of training. I carry Quick Clot. I carry an Israeli bandage. I carry extra narcotics. I carry extra anxiety medication, and I also carry, what did I miss? A splint. And so I make sure, and I can carry more gear because I'm on moto, and I fully realize that. But I carry all that stuff with me in case of any one of those situations, and I was trained search and rescue, first aid, first responder, and so and a tourniquet. That's the other thing I carry as well.
Cravat too.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I think that the first step is telling someone your plan for the day and your estimated time back.
Yeah, for
Because
sure.
It's great to have all those resources, but things can go wrong.
Wait, let me jump on that.
Got more.
And when you tell them the truth. When I was in search and rescue in Montana, we had 4 dudes that told their wives where they were going hunting. They didn't go where they said they were.
I think we'll go ahead and end it for questions there. If you've got any more, you can come up to any of our great panelists afterwards. Thank you all for coming out. Quickly, tomorrow night, Alpenglow Expeditions is hosting an avalanche safety summit at the Palisades Village. They'll have guides, patrollers, and hopefully a forecaster from Sierra Avalanche Center out there. That's from 6 to 7 tomorrow night. And then on Saturday, Todd and Lake Tahoe Snowmobilers will be hosting their monthly meetup, which is open to all users, not just snowmobilers. They'll have a beacon park set up down at Blue Lakes Hope Valley Snow Park. You can find all of this information on takecaretahoe.org. This is wrapping up Backcountry Safety Awareness Week. I would like to give a big thank you to RMU Truckee, to Robbie specifically. Stick around. There's
And
live.
Savinbrook.
And Savinbrook, yeah, they've been involved since day one of the planning for this week, which we really appreciate. They have live music at 8 p.m. in the main building, so stick around, tip your bartenders, and to give a big round of applause to all of our panelists. Thank you all for coming out today. Also, there are some resources up here, maps and other pamphlets if you want to grab some.
Stickers.